Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely.
Today we're tackling public policy and administration.
We're going to break down how societies decide what needs fixing and, yeah, how they actually get things done,
So, public policy, that's the big picture, right? Governments making choices about the problems to tackle first.
like climate change or healthcare or education.
Basically, all the big stuff.
It's about coming up with solutions, but also about figuring out all those competing interests. Like take healthcare as an example.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
You got patients, you got doctors, insurance companies, those pharmaceutical companies, all wanting different things.
How do we even start making sense of all that?
That's where public administration comes in. If public policy is deciding what to do, administration's all about the how.
The action plan.
Putting those policies into action, managing resources, getting those government agencies to actually work together. It's making things work on the ground.
Sounds like a pretty massive job.
It can be. You need people who know how to budget, how to manage people, how to plan strategically, all those practical things that keep everything running.
Okay, so we know what public policy and administration are, but why should our listeners care?
Understanding this stuff can actually give you more power than you might think. Say you're passionate about, oh, I don't know, affordable housing.
Great example.
Knowing how policies are made and used gives you tools. You can analyze the problem, you can advocate for solutions, you can even hold those decision makers accountable.
So it's about being an active citizen, not just complaining.
Exactly. And it's not just government jobs either. These skills are useful in tons of careers. Nonprofits, international organizations, even businesses. They all need people who get how policy works.
You mentioned businesses. I always thought business and government were kind of like on opposite sides.
There's definitely been tension there, but we're seeing more and more need for collaboration. Look at those tech companies, for example. They're dealing with AI ethics, data privacy, all sorts of stuff that has huge policy implications.
So they need people who can bridge that gap between tech and policy.
Right.
It's all connected.
It really is. Speaking of real-world impact, have you heard about Rwanda's gender equality policies?
I have. It's pretty amazing.
They've managed to get women's representation in parliament to over 60%.
Highest in the world. What's their secret?
Well, it's a few things. They have a quota system for parliament seats. Plus, they've invested in programs to help women become leaders, and they're working to change cultural ideas about women's roles.
So it's a whole system, not just one thing.
Exactly. And it shows that good policies, when you actually use them well, can make a huge difference.
Okay, so we know this stuff is important, but what if someone's thinking, okay, this is interesting, but what jobs are we talking about here?
Oh, there are a lot of options. You could be a policy analyst at a think tank doing research and coming up with solutions. Or maybe you're a program manager at a nonprofit, actually running those programs that help people.
So you could be doing research or you could be more hands-on.
Exactly. And those are just two examples. You could work for government, for an international organization, even an advocacy group. There's so much variety.
So many choices. How do you even start?
Internships are a great way to start. Get some real-world experience, even locally. You could volunteer at a city council meeting or do an internship at a local NGO. Those experiences help you figure out what you like.
Try things out, see what clicks.
That's it. And remember, your career might take you in unexpected directions. That's part of the fun.
Okay, let's be real for a second. This sounds cool, but it can't be all easy, right? What kind of challenges do people in this field face?
Well, like anything, there are some frustrations. One of the biggest is dealing with politics. Policies don't just exist on their own.
There's always a bigger picture.
Exactly. You've got political pressure, competing interests. Things are always changing.
So even with a great idea, it might not go anywhere.
Sometimes, yeah, you might run into powerful groups that don't like your idea, or you might not have the money to do it. Sometimes a new government comes in and changes everything.
That's got to be frustrating. How do people stay motivated?
It's tough, for sure. But a lot of people in this field, they're really committed to public service. They want to make a difference, even if it's hard. And those little victories, a policy that helps a few people, a program that makes a community better, those things can keep you going.
So you need to be resilient.
Yeah, you do. And a good sense of humor helps too.
So we've talked about politics, but what about ethical dilemmas? Those must come up a lot in this field.
Oh, absolutely. You're making decisions that affect people's lives all the time. And sometimes there's just no easy answer.
What kind of ethical problems might someone face?
Let's say you're working on a policy to address homelessness.
Important issue.
You might have to balance the needs of the people who are homeless with the concerns of businesses and residents. Or you might have to decide how to use limited resources. It gets complicated.
You need a strong sense of right and wrong to deal with that.
You do. And you need to be willing to talk honestly with everyone involved, even when they disagree.
So it's not just about the technical stuff, it's about people skills and ethics too.
Exactly. That's what makes this field so challenging, but also so rewarding. You're always learning, growing, and thinking about these complex issues.
Back again for more on public policy and administration.
Ready to get into the details?
Last time we talked about what these fields are, why they're important, and even some of the jobs you could have.
Yeah, we talked about some of the tough parts too, like those political battles and ethical dilemmas.
It's not all sunshine and roses.
Definitely not.
So let's get into how policies are actually made, and more importantly, how they get put into practice.
Moving from the what to the how.
Okay, so let's say we found a problem that needs a policy solution, something that's affecting a lot of people.
Like the rising cost of childcare. That's a big one for families these days.
A perfect example, it ties into economics, education, even gender equality.
Hits all the big points.
So how do we go from childcare is too expensive to an actual policy that helps?
That's where policy analysis comes in.
Sounds very organized.
It is. It's about being thorough.
So what are the steps? Why do you analyze a problem like this?
Well, first you got to gather all the evidence. Data's key here. We need to figure out how big the problem really is.
So for childcare, we'd look at the average cost, how much it's gone up, and how that compares to other costs for families.
Yeah.
And we'd want to know who's being hit hardest. Are certain groups struggling more than others?
Absolutely. Got to see where the biggest impact is.
We'd also want to see what policies already exist. Are there government programs or tax breaks already helping with childcare?
Right. Got to know what's already in place before you start changing things.
It's like you don't just prescribe medicine without knowing the patient's history.
Good way to put it.
Okay, so we've got the data, we've talked to people. What's next?
Now comes the hard part. We have to look at all the options, different policies we could make, and figure out what might happen.
Brainstorming solutions and then trying to predict the consequences.
Exactly.
With childcare, we could give money directly to families, maybe tax breaks for those costs, or even expand public preschool.
Lots of ways to approach it.
But each one has its own pros and cons, right?
Of course. Direct subsidies would help families right away, but they can get really expensive for the government.
And tax breaks might be easier to get approved, but they might not help the families who need it most.
Right. Expanding public preschool would be good for kids in the long run, but it costs a lot up front.
So many things to balance. Who benefits, who might get left out, and what happens down the line.
That's where those analytical tools come in handy.
You mean like those frameworks analysts use to break down a problem?
Exactly. Things like SWOT analysis, looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
I've heard of that one.
And cost-benefit analysis, where you try to put a number on the costs and benefits of each option.
Trying to make sense of all the data and choose the best path forward.
Right. A good analyst is like a detective, gathering clues and figuring